You're watching Euronews Now. I'm Takumbo Silako with your top stories. Britain says preparations for its next deportation flight to Rwanda are underway despite legal challenges from the European Court of Human Rights. Russia vows to keep open a humanitarian corridor to allow civilians to escape intense fighting in the Ukrainian city of Severodonetsk. Also, Europe's most popular animation film festival opens at Annecy. We'll take a look at what's competing for the top awards.
The UK has been forced to cancel a flight that was scheduled to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. It followed last-minute intervention by the European Court of Human Rights, which said the actions carry a real risk of irreversible harm. Protesters have denounced the UK's plan, arguing it is illegal and inhumane to send people thousands of miles to a country they don't want to live in. And the UN has described the policy as an attack on the rights of refugees that most countries have recognized since the end of World War II, including the UK. Home Secretary Priti Patel, who signed the agreement with Rwanda last month, defended the plan. And she said the government will not be deterred from doing the right thing and delivering our plans to control our nation's borders, despite the first flight to Rwanda being stopped. Dismissing the outcry, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has defended Britain's policy, arguing that it is a legitimate way to protect lives and stop smugglers transporting migrants across the English Channel in small boats.
Well, behind me is the British military base, where last night that first flight to Rwanda under the UK's new refugee policy should have taken off from. All through the afternoon, there were legal fights taking place in London courts, but the British government was determined that the flight would take off at around 10:30. The plane, a specially chartered Boeing 767, was fueled. The flight crew could be spotted through the cockpit windows, but 20 minutes before that departure, there was news from the European Court of Human Rights, a legal reprieve for the 7 on board. They got to disembark. They will now stay in the UK whilst these legal fights continue. And that flight, which cost the British government an estimated £500,000, took off empty back to the company's headquarters in Madrid. Now, the British government are adamant that they will not be deterred by this, that they will go through with the policy, and if needs be, they will change British law in order to be able to do this. They point as well to the fact that yesterday around 300 refugees crossed the channel using those small boats, putting themselves at danger because it is a very busy shipping lane, and there are photos of one of them coming very close to a tanker, and that is the reason that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, and the Home Secretary Priti Patel says that this policy needs to work, that there has to be some deterrence to stop that trafficking. Vincent McAviney, Euronews, London.
Russia says it's offering a humanitarian corridor for trapped civilians seeking to flee intense fighting in the devastated East Ukraine city of Severodonetsk. Like before in Mariupol, civilians are taking shelter in a plant complex. About 500 people, 40 of them children, need safe passage out. Ukraine's troops had earlier attempted to lead civilians to safety, but the destruction of the last 3 bridges out of the city had made it impossible. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has made a rallying cry to his people.
We have losses, unfortunately, and they are painful, but we need to hang in there. This is our state. Hanging in there in Donbas is crucial. The more they lose there, the less strength they will have to continue the aggression. Donbas is the key to deciding who will dominate in the coming weeks.
After months of shelling in Severodonetsk and in the region nearby, some residents who've decided to stay are struggling with no water, electricity or phone signal, desperately hoping for the war to end. Obviously distressed, Yevgenia and Maxim ask why they're being bombed. There are no soldiers here, they said. There's no one here.
Нету тут никого.
Surrounded by destruction, there is a growing call for peace talks to end a war few understand.
NATO needs a higher state of readiness to strengthen its weapons capabilities along its eastern border in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg was speaking in the Netherlands following informal talks with the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte and the leaders of Denmark, Poland, Latvia, Romania, Portugal and Belgium. It comes ahead of a wider summit at the end of the month in Madrid.
Tonight we discussed the need for more robust and combat-ready forward presence, even higher readiness and more pre-positioned equipment and supplies. We also addressed the need to invest more in our defence and to invest more together to strengthen NATO's common funding.
The Polish Prime Minister expressed his support for Ukraine.
I ask you to do much more to deliver weapon, artillery to Ukraine. They need this to defend their country, to defend their territorial integrity and sovereignty. Where is our credibility if Ukraine fails? Can we imagine that Ukraine fails and we revert back to business as usual? I hope not.
Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has been showing his support for 500 French soldiers deployed in Romania since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Macron is expected to visit Moldova on Wednesday, and there's also a possible trip to Energy bills, petrol and food prices have been steadily rising since Russia's invasion of Ukraine back in February. With Europeans struggling with the effects on everything from basic food to travel. In Italy, prices at the pumps have reached €2 a litre.
I have a car that runs on petrol. Clearly, it has an impact on our family's expenses. It has doubled. Just like the bills, it's a general problem.
Serbians are also feeling the pinch, with prices jumping almost 70% in some places. That despite recent attempts from the government to cut prices in petrol stations.
I don't know if this is all due to Ukraine. Maybe it's a manufactured global crisis. It's not okay that the prices rose by 70% or even more. I don't know exactly.
But experts say the squeeze on consumers do not stop at the fuel pump.
When you have such a budget constraint, every citizen has a limited amount of income. It will affect other income, your other spending on other goods, and it will decrease the economic activity in future period.
Germany is suffering yet another blow. A major American natural gas terminal has announced it will be offline for at least 3 months. It comes as politicians consider restricting corporations' profits.
European and other gas companies have massively increased prices. I think it's an abuse of the market to justify all this now with the war in Ukraine. Should an antitrust authority really not strike yet in this situation?
German lawmakers are also considering driving bans and reducing speed limits on their famous autobahns in a bid to reduce consumption.
A second man has been arrested in connection to the disappearance of a British journalist and indigenous expert who went missing in the Amazon rainforest over a week ago. The fisherman, who is now in custody, is the brother of the main suspect in the case. Earlier this week, Brazilian authorities found the personal belongings of the missing men, Bruno Pereira and Dom Phillips, submerged in the river.
We're going to take a little break in the programme, but we'll be back in a few moments with more news and analysis. Don't go anywhere.